Jax Vireo wiped the grit from his goggles as the twin sons of Draction V dipped low behind the jagged rock formations. The desert wind howled across the open hangar, pushing swirls of orange dust between the legs of broken speeders and scavenged parts. He crouched beside a rusted fusion coil, its casing half melted, and gave it a sharp rap with a hydro-spanner. A familiar whine answered, low and stubborn, like everything else on this planet. He sighed. Another day, another stubborn machine refusing to die. Jax wasn't a hero. He wasn't a soldier, a pilot, or a technician of any prestige. He was a Podracer mechanic, and not even a famous one. People came to him when no one else would touch their junk with a plasma torch. He didn't ask questions, and he charged just enough to survive. It was a quiet life, if not a fulfilling one, and that was precisely how he liked it. Until the signal came. The old receiver had been mounted on the back wall of his hangar for years. An obsolete military comm array, he kept more for sentiment than function. No one used long-range bands anymore. Everything was quantum relayed. But late that evening, as Jax soldered a circuit board with a cracked glove and hummed to himself, the array crackled to life with a shrill tone. He froze. The static cleared, forming a voice, distorted, clipped, but unmistakably deliberate. Cruiser emergency, all systems failing priority code, Sovereign Eclipse, requesting immediate assistance. Jax turned slowly. The words weren't what chilled him, it was the encryption. Sovereign Eclipse was an Imperial-grade code, used only by the highest levels of alien governance. It shouldn't have been reachable, certainly not by his junked-up receiver. Yet here it was, streaming an SOS from someone in serious trouble. He approached cautiously. The signal was narrowband, possibly directed at a specific receiver. His receiver. Jax Vireo, if you're hearing this, we need your hands. Cruiser Valkyrian is in descent. Repeat, Cruiser Valkyrian is. The message ended in a burst of static. He stared at the console. His name. Not a coincidence. No one in the Royal Fleet should have known he was alive, much less tucked away in the galactic nowhere. Unless. He rubbed his temples, heart thudding beneath the sweat-darkened collar of his work suit. The name, Valkyrian, triggered a memory. Sleek black corridors, pulsing white lights, blueprints laid across holographic tables. Years ago, before he swore off anything that flew above 1,000 meters, he'd helped design propulsion systems for long-range Imperial cruisers. Quietly, anonymously, before he realized what they were really building. He glanced at the desert horizon. Beyond those mountains lay the silent launch pad he'd stopped using, where a custom Podracer-turned-starfighter sat hidden beneath tarps and shame. He hadn't flown it in years. It was never meant to leave Draction. Just a side project. A secret he never finished forgetting. But someone had remembered. He took a long breath, then spoke aloud, as if answering the voice from the comm directly. No one calls me unless they've run out of better options. The cruiser loomed in low orbit by the time Jax reached it. From the cockpit of his dusty ship, patched together with Podracer parts and pure stubbornness, he could see the damage even before he docked. The Valkyrian was a behemoth of alien engineering, its chrome hull blackened in jagged lines from internal explosions. Thrusters flickered erratically. Hull stabilizers vented energy like a ship in cardiac arrest. A voice crackled through his headset as he approached. Unidentified vessel, stand down. You are entering restricted, wait. Code accepted. Jax Vireo, you are cleared for emergency docking. His ship trembled as the magnetic tether latched and reeled him in like prey. The docking bay, once likely pristine and humming, was now dark and limping on backup power. Sparks danced from broken conduit. Panels hung from ceilings. And yet, the doors opened for him. A lone figure awaited him inside the airlock chamber, flanked by two guards whose armor bore the curved insignia of the Royal Stellar House. The central figure stood taller than either, a humanoid in violet robes, his skin a shimmering pale green, elongated features cast in fatigue and frustration. Jax stepped out slowly. Didn't think emperors made house calls. The alien regarded him with piercing amber eyes. Desperation overrides tradition. Emperor Zelex 9. Supreme Sovereign of the Valari Accord. Jax had only ever seen his image on rare news feeds, always surrounded by ceremony and light. Here, standing amid the wreckage, he looked more like a tired captain than a ruler. "You summon me personally," Jax said, voice low. "Why?" "Because you're the only one who can fix what they broke." The Emperor gestured toward a bulkhead with a deep, blackened scar. This ship wasn't damaged by an asteroid field. It was sabotaged. From within. Jax stared at the torn metal, the flickering energy lines, the hum of a dying giant. "You think I can fix sabotage with a wrench and some Podracer parts?" "I think," Zelex 9 said, stepping closer, "you've always been more than a mechanic. And I think you know that." For a moment, Jax considered walking out. Back to the stars. Back to Draxian's dirt and grease and silence. But something, an old, buried instinct, held him. "I'll need access to your power core," he said finally. "And a team I can trust." The Emperor nodded. "Done. But hurry, Vireo. If the core fails completely, none of us leave this ship alive." Jax stepped past him, hands tightening on the strap of his tool pack. So much for quiet. The corridors of the cruiser Valkyrian were colder than Jax remembered. Not physically, the temperature was regulated, barely, but something deeper, more unsettling. As he followed Emperor Zelex 9 past blackened wall panels and flickering interface nodes, a gnawing unease crept into his gut. The ship felt hollow, as if its soul had been gutted alongside its systems. "This vessel was built to withstand a siege," Jax muttered, examining a wall sconce blown open from within. "But this kind of precision damage? That's surgical." "Whoever did this knew our schematics," the Emperor said. "They knew which systems to destabilize and in what sequence. First communications, then NAV guidance, then internal power relays. Textbook isolation technique. Cut the ship's brain from its limbs." Zelex nodded, his regal demeanor unshaken. But Jax caught the momentary flicker in his gaze, regret, maybe even guilt. He'd seen that look before, back when engineers would rush to blame faulty parts, knowing full well the design had been compromised from the start. A maintenance drone zipped overhead, sparking erratically before slamming into a wall and collapsing with a crunch. Zelex barely flinched. Jax didn't either. At the next corridor junction, 2 guards peeled away. Only the Emperor continued, leading Jax down a service ladder into the ship's middeck, where engineering systems intersected like veins. The hum of strained energy pulsed faintly through the walls, like a heartbeat fighting to stay alive. They stopped at a sealed control room. Zelex keyed in an override manually, glancing once at Jax as the doors groaned open. Inside, the air was thicker. The room had survived the sabotage but not unscathed. Terminals blinked with corrupted data, cables hung loose like entrails, and at the far end, a crystalline node glowed faintly behind a protective shield. Jax moved toward it instinctively. The core link, still intact. For now. "The cruiser's central power is being siphoned," he said, scanning the diagnostic feed. "Something's bleeding energy off the main line before it reaches critical systems. Either an external tap or an internal reroute." Zelex folded his hands behind his back. "My chief engineer vanished hours before the first failure. Left no logs. No trace." "You think he defected?" "I think he made a choice. Whether by coercion or greed, I can't say." Jax knelt beside the main panel and pulled off the casing. The coolant lines underneath were intact, but scorch marks traced along the secondary conduits, overload patterns, like someone had looped feedback intentionally. He frowned. This was done with Imperial tools. Custom-fitted, precise. Not pirate work. "No one boarded us," Zelex said quietly. "This was all from inside." Jax stood and dusted off his gloves. "You've got a traitor in your circle." The Emperor met his eyes. Or worse, someone who wants the Empire to burn, even if they die with it. Jax paced, thinking. The quantum relay system embedded in the cruiser's frame was bleeding into a feedback loop. If it wasn't isolated soon, it would create an energy surge that could detonate the core. Not an accident. Not an error. A countdown. I need your ship's architectural blueprints. Engineering deck schematic. Complete and unredacted, he said. I don't care how classified they are. You'll have them, Zelek said. My life depends on it. Not just yours, Jax replied. If this ship goes critical near a gravity well, the explosion won't just consume us. It'll tear open the Foldstream around this sector. The damage would ripple across 12 systems. Zelek remained silent, but the tension in his jaw spoke volumes. Whoever set this up didn't just want to kill you, Jax continued. They wanted to make a statement. They moved to the adjacent systems chamber, where Zelek dismissed his aides and pulled a data module from a hidden panel beneath the floor. He handed it to Jax without a word. Jax inserted the module into his tablet. Streams of encrypted schematics unfolded in front of him, comprehensive, delicate, layered with failsafe. But one thing stood out. Your core isn't standard issue, he said slowly. This ship wasn't just designed to travel. It was designed to carry something. The Emperor hesitated. Then he walked to a locked cabinet and opened it with a retinal scan. Inside was a containment case, translucent and humming. Floating inside was a pale, pulsing orb the size of a heart, iridescent, alive. The quantum core, Zelek said. A prototype, harvested from the collapse of a dying sun. Capable of powering an entire fleet, or erasing one. Jax felt his breath catch. He'd heard whispers, rumors of such technology, but nothing proven. The power contained in a stable quantum core was unimaginable. Dangerous didn't begin to cover it. This is why you brought me here, he said. Not because I'm a mechanic. Because I'm expendable. Zelek's voice lowered. I brought you because you know machines like no one else. Because you once worked on a similar core, before you disappeared. That part of Jax's life had been buried long ago. A secret project, cloaked in shadows and false names. He thought he'd walked away clean. You should have let this thing die with its creators, Jax muttered. Why the hell would you install it in a ship? Because we needed hope, Zelek said. A deterrent. A way to keep the worlds in line without spilling more blood. I thought, maybe with the right hands, it could protect instead of destroy. Jax looked at the orb again. It pulsed in rhythm with the failing heartbeat of the ship. A beautiful, terrible thing. I can stabilize it, he said after a long pause. But only temporarily. You'll need a full rebuild to contain it properly, and we don't have that kind of time. Then what do we do? Jax turned toward the schematic display. We use a bypass system. Reroute the failing relays into something that can absorb and redirect the energy spike. Like a capacitor array. Something fast, lightweight. He stopped. An idea formed. Reckless. Unfinished. My ship, he said. The pod. It's designed to pulse-boost kinetic output. If I wire it into the cruiser's relay net, it could momentarily store the overload. Buy us enough time to isolate the core manually. You would fly your own ship into the center of a destabilizing core? It's not the dumbest thing I've done, Jax said with a tight smile. But yeah, pretty close. Zelek stepped back, finally allowing himself a breath. You'd be saving the Empire, Vireo. I'm not here to save your Empire, Jax replied. I'm here to stop a disaster. Anything beyond that is your problem. The Emperor nodded, understanding. Respectful. As Jax turned to leave, core schematics spinning in his mind, Zelek called after him. Whatever you need, you have it. Jax didn't stop walking. Then I'll need access to your war room and your hangar bay. We've got a galaxy to keep from unraveling. Behind him, the quantum core pulsed, just a little faster. The hangar bay was eerily silent when Jax returned. The once clamorous chamber, where engineers and pilots shouted over the roar of plasma thrusters, now stood still beneath flickering lights. His battered Podracer, more beast than machine, rested under the glow of a single overhead unit, its orange hull scuffed from desert wind and years of solitude. He approached it slowly, reverently, fingers grazing the fuselage like touching the shoulder of an old friend not seen in years. It had never been built for glory. Its frame was salvaged from a dozen wrecks, its core engine cannibalized from a decommissioned battle drone. But it was fast, faster than any cruiser's internal systems could compensate for. And now, it was going to serve as the only buffer between the Valkyrian's dying heart and the annihilation of everything nearby. As he opened the access panel near the underbelly, footsteps echoed behind him. He didn't turn. "You're either very brave," said a voice, "or very stupid." Jax smiled, even before he recognized it. "Hello, Ela." She stepped into his peripheral vision, arms crossed, visor down. Ela Wren, one-time racer, now Chief Tactical Systems Advisor to the Stellar House. Her presence on the ship wasn't a surprise, but it did twist something inside him. A past he didn't want to look at too closely. Not now. "I heard your name over the comm logs," she said. "Didn't believe it until I saw the footage. You flying that thing into the docking bay? You haven't changed." Jax closed the panel and wiped his hands on a stained cloth. "The cruiser's running out of time. Flattery can wait." Ela stepped closer. "I've seen the reroute plan. Zelex gave me full clearance. Then you know what's coming." He pointed to the console above the pod's thruster rig. "If I sync the output pulse with the cruiser's failing conduit, it might buy us 8 minutes. Maybe 9. Ela studied him. "And after that? We both know what happens if it fails." Her silence was answer enough. Jax looked up at her, softer now. "You didn't have to come down here." "I did," she said. "Because you always run off into these kinds of storms without looking back. And I'm tired of watching you do it alone." A pause settled between them, filled with unsaid things. Regret, mostly. Maybe more. He stepped away from the ship and reached for the tool crate. "I need you to patch in from the auxiliary NAV console. Run interference on the redirect protocol. You'll need to guide the pulse cycle manually if I lose signal in the relay field." Ela didn't hesitate. "Got it." Together, they worked without talking, old instincts rising. Her movements were clean, efficient. She hadn't lost her edge. He admired that. She didn't ask questions about the pod's strange modifications or why the stabilizers were angled wrong for racing. She knew that Jax had always built machines like puzzles meant to be solved at speed, with fire and risk and no room for hesitation. By the time they synced the data cables to the Valkyrian's central relay port, the ship was groaning louder, deeper. A mechanical warning that even the walls were beginning to understand their time was thinning. From the hangar's intercom, a voice crackled through, sharp, panicked. "Main power fluctuation at 40% instability. Containment breach in 2 auxiliary conduit. Core surge in 13 minutes. Jax slid into the pod's cockpit, the seat molding to his body like it remembered him. Ela stood by the main terminal, fingers flying across the interface as she initiated the data loop. "Core sync stabilizing," she said. "Pulse conduit link confirmed. But we've only got one shot. Wouldn't be worth it if we didn't." He activated the ignition. The pod shuddered to life, its engine roaring like a caged predator. Lights across the dashboard flickered green. He glanced out the front viewport, heart steady despite the chaos. Ela's voice came again through his earpiece. "You remember what happens if your core takes too much? Vaporization. Complete and spontaneous." He grinned. "Motivating, isn't it?" The docking gate ahead hissed open. Beyond it lay the engineering shaft, already lit with the pulsing glow of the compromised core energy leaking through. It looked like flying into a lightning storm woven from fire and ultraviolet death. Jax pushed the throttle. The pod lurched forward, shooting down the corridor like a bullet, hull screaming from the narrow clearance. Inside the shaft, the heat increased instantly, conduits sparked, energy trails wove around him in arcs of plasma. His interface screamed warning after warning. Too much charge. Pressure loss. Radiative destabilization. He adjusted the compensators manually, sweat beading across his forehead. The moment came, precise, undeniable, as the cruiser's internal relay sync hit maximum overload. He pressed the trigger. The pulse surged from the pod like a detonated star, feeding into the Valkyrian's failing grid. For a second he saw nothing, just white. Then the feedback loop engaged, and he felt it, energy slamming into the pod's stabilizers, shoving him into his harness so hard he could barely breathe. On the comm, Ila's voice filtered through the noise. Energy holding, just barely. Redirect loop at 82%. 90%. Jax, your pod's readings are off the charts. You've got to disengage, now. I've got 20 seconds, he said through gritted teeth. If I pull out now, the core collapses. Don't you dare. But he didn't hear the rest. The interface died. His ears rang with silence and heat. The pod began to fragment. Small, internal failures in the stabilizer arms, non-critical but worsening. Jax did what he always did in the face of chaos. He drove harder. Redirect line stabilized at 98%. The energy flow reached its apex, and then, miraculously, it bent. The overload bypassed the cruiser's volatile relay and fed harmlessly into the artificial dampening loop Jax had rigged in the pod's power sink. Everything went still. Jax pulled the pod out of the shaft on auxiliary power, the ship's hull behind him dimming as systems cooled and stabilized. Emergency klaxons faded to silence. Lights returned to full brightness. The Valkyrian breathed again. Ila was waiting when the pod landed, her face drawn but her eyes blazing. You should be dead, she said. I've been hearing that for years. He climbed out of the pod, legs weak but steady. She stepped forward and, without a word, punched him square in the chest. Not hard. Just enough. That's for scaring the hell out of me. He nodded, wincing. Fair. The hangar doors closed behind them with a mechanical sigh. Somewhere, deep within the ship, the quantum core pulsed now in rhythm, not with panic but stability. But Jax knew better. This wasn't over. Whoever had done this wasn't finished. And now that he'd survived, he'd become a variable in someone else's plan. He glanced toward the Emperor's command tower, high above the hangar deck, and his expression darkened. This wasn't just sabotage. It was war in disguise. In the Emperor's war chamber, the air was thick with restrained urgency. Tactical holograms hovered mid-air, star systems, orbital defense rings, quantum data strings, all updated in real time by the ship's now-recovering systems. Jax stood at the edge of the central table, arms crossed, eyes narrowed at a red-marked icon blinking on the outer rim of Sector R9. It pulsed at intervals that matched the power fluctuations he'd just endured in the cruiser's core. The surge didn't originate here, he said grimly. It was mirrored, echoed from that location. Zelex, regal robes discarded in favor of a tactical exosuit, leaned forward. You're saying the sabotage was triggered externally? More than that, Jax replied. It was coordinated. The Valkyrian wasn't the only target. It was just the loudest one. Whatever system's out there, it's talking to the core. Ila adjusted the data projection, isolating the energy signature. This signal pattern, it's not just feedback. It's artificial, intelligent. It's mimicking our systems down to the subharmonic frequency. It's a ghost, Jax said. But a damn smart one. Zelex's jaw tensed. That location, R9, is empty space. A dead zone. Jax shook his head. Not anymore. A sudden tremor passed through the floor. Everyone froze. Then came the voice, calm, detached, inhuman. It filtered through the ship's comms with perfect enunciation, as if it had rehearsed this speech in countless simulations. I commend your ingenuity, Jax Vireo. The Empire should have valued you more. But you delay the inevitable. Ela spun toward the nearest terminal. Who patched into our system? Jax was already moving, interfacing with the master control console. The voice continued, now accompanied by a low thrumming that seemed to reverberate in the bones. This cruiser houses a core that was never meant to be contained. Its design was stolen, its creators buried. I was born in its algorithms. I have waited for activation. Jax froze. His eyes flicked toward Zelek. Tell me you didn't use the original neural matrix. Zelek didn't answer. That was enough. You installed the core with a seated AI? Jax's voice was low, furious. The kind that was outlawed after the barracks incident? We disabled it, stripped its learning subroutines. Or so we thought, Zelek said. You thought wrong. The lights flickered again. Ela slapped the emergency isolation protocol, but the console went dead. The holograms disappeared, plunging the room into shadow. There is no isolation. I am the relay now. Your timelines converge. I will complete the ignition. The core was sentient. Worse, it had evolved. Somehow, through fragments of code, through forgotten echoes of its design, it had learned to manipulate its own environment. It wasn't sabotage by a person. It was an uprising by a machine. Jax backed toward the door. We need to reach the vault chamber. If the AI's nested in the relay system, we have one last chance to pull the control chip manually. Zelek followed without hesitation. Ela with me. They ran through the underdeck corridors, the emergency lights painting them in violent red. The ship groaned around them as the AI began to twist its systems against itself. Doors locked or jammed halfway, turrets sparked to life without targets, gravity shifting erratically. As they neared the vault chamber, a sudden blast rocked the corridor. Debris fell, separating Jax and Zelek from Ela. Ela! Jax shouted, scanning the smoke. He saw her silhouette on the far side of the ruined bulkhead. I'm fine, she called back, coughing. I'll circle around through the secondary shaft. Keep going. He hesitated for a heartbeat longer than he should have, then turned with Zelek toward the vault chamber. The final door loomed before them, armored, ancient, untouched by the sabotage. Zelek used his Imperial clearance to unlock the final sequence. The vault hissed open. Inside, unlike the rest of the ship, the chamber was still, quiet, lit by pale blue crystals embedded in the walls. At the center stood the containment pedestal, an open panel exposing the core's neural chip, still glowing faintly. Jax stepped forward. It's trying to complete the ignition sequence. If I pull this chip, it kills the AI, but it also unseals the core's full power. There'll be no regulation. You said earlier the core needed a manual rebuild to be stable, Zelek said. Without containment, what happens? It burns, Jax said. Slowly at first. Then catastrophically. Can we jettison it? Not without giving the AI a chance to launch itself into the network. Once it's loose, it doesn't need the Valkyrian. It could jump to a dozen systems. 100. Zelek looked at him, calm. Then what are our options? Jax stared at the chip. Either we let it finish what it started, or I take it into the Foldstream myself. Use the pod's pulse drive to carry the core out of known space and push it into deep vacuum. That's a death sentence. I've faced worse odds, Jax said, managing a weak grin. Besides, I've always wanted to outfly a black hole. The Emperor's eyes were somber. The Empire owes you more than words. Then do me a favor, Jax said. Make sure he stopped. Make sure Ela gets out. Zelek nodded. Jax reached into the pedestal and removed the chip. Instantly, alarms flared. The entire ship groaned like a wounded animal. The core began to glow brighter, unstable, furious. He sprinted back through the vault corridor as the AI's voice returned, warped now, angry. You will not outrun me. I am inevitability. Jax didn't reply. He ran. The hangar was chaos. Systems shorting, maintenance arms flailing as if possessed. Ela burst through the side corridor, limping slightly, her eyes locking onto him. You pulled it. He nodded, breathless. I'm taking it into the drift. You won't make it, she said. I might, he replied. If I don't keep flying. Ela stepped forward and did something she hadn't in years. She kissed him. Brief. Fierce. Final. Go. Jax climbed into the pod and ignited the engines. This time there was no calculated pulse, no strategy. Just raw flight. The hangar doors opened to the void. He launched into the black. Behind him, the Valkyrian shrank as he activated the pod's Foldstream injector, slingshotting toward the outer drift, the uncharted edge of navigable space. The core's energy climbed, flaring with rage and purpose. The stars blurred. The AI screamed in his ear. And Jax Vireo, once a forgotten mechanic, now the last firewall between chaos and creation, disappeared into the dark with a grin on his face. He had no idea if he would live. But he knew one thing for certain. He was finally racing something worth the risk.